Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be wrapping up all of the classics that I read in 2021. My goal was to read 10. I read 6 and a quarter. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about all of these, and then I was thinking, like, today's December 19th, there's no way that I'm gonna be reading another classic this year, but I always tend to read A Christmas Carol around Christmas time. Although right now I'm not in the mood to read any classics, so unless I can find an audiobook, I might skip this year. You know, a couple years ago I listened to Amazon did a special with Tim Curry, and he narrated A Christmas Carol, and it was amazing. And I found it, but it unfortunately is not free because it was on Amazon. So do I want to buy it? I don't know. I really don't know. But I'd really like to continue the tradition of reading this every year, so maybe. But the other classics that I finished, first I finished Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and I actually started it at the end of 2020 and then finished it in 2021. I really enjoyed this book. I love the newest adaptation by Greta Gerwig. I think it's amazing, and it really made me want to read the book even more, and I really enjoyed it. The one thing I will say I did not enjoy is the first part. I think it's separated in two parts. Well, this version is. The first part is when they're younger, and then the second part is when they're adults. And I didn't love the first part because I felt like it was very, like, I felt like every single chapter was Marmee teaching them a lesson, and I didn't like that. I found it very annoying. But the second part I really enjoyed. Honestly, and I know this might be appalling to some people, but if you're not interested in reading part 1, just skip it. Just go to part 2, and I think you'll be fine. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Definitely made me cry, of course. If you know, you know. If you don't, read it, and then you'll know, and you'll cry too. But really great. I also really love this edition. I think it's so pretty, and there are little illustrations at the beginning of every chapter. So yeah, highly recommend. Really enjoyed. Great classic novel that I will come back to later in life. So yeah, I did read 2 Jane Austens this year. The first one was Emma, which is 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend. I think I might have really enjoyed this one after seeing the newest Emma adaptation, which I think it's kind of interesting because there are some adaptions, there are some like movie adaptions where I'll see the movie and then I'll read the book and then I instantly hate the book because the movie was better, which is a thing. Sometimes the movie is better. It was not the case in this. I just feel like the adaptation really brought to life this great book. And I know a lot of people actually really hate Emma because they think she's like childish and really vain and just like a silly little girl who thinks she's so important. But I feel like there's just such great character development in this, and also I just really love the aspects that we get to see of the village and the town and the way that Emma and the other characters interact with each other. I just really loved this book. So give it a shot if you want. And then the other one I read was Northanger Abbey, which I did not love as much. I don't know if this is her shortest book, but it definitely reads that way. This copy itself is less than 200 pages, and this one also I did not know anything about. I assumed it had something to do with Northanger Abbey, and it does. It did. It's about this girl who kind of meets this guy, and they get to know each other-ish, and then his father invites her to Northanger Abbey to stay there for a while because he thinks that she's an heiress and they need money. She's actually very poor. But this book was great because it's kind of like a satire of like gothic romance, which I think is fun considering the time that she wrote it. And you definitely get that vibe where the room that the girl ends up staying in, she's like thinking things are happening, like you know, those very specific gothic elements of like, is something happening? Is it in my head? Things like that. So it was good in that way. It was so short and I really wanted more to it. And I felt like it was lacking because of that. So not my favorite. I have to reread Persuasion to decide whether this one or Persuasion is my least favorite. And then the most recent classics I read The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes with my library book club. This is just a collection of his stories, and if you've never read any of them, but you've seen like Sherlock, the series, the BBC series with Benedict Cumberbatch, or if you've seen the adaptations with Robert Downey Jr., I think you'll be kind of surprised when you read this because it's very I really love the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr. I think they're very intriguing, like the clues and like the way that he thinks. It definitely pulls you in. And you get a little bit of that within each story, but like they're so short and they're very, very formulaic. I mean, it's kind of interesting with the history. Like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually hated the character of Sherlock Holmes. He hated writing him. He thought that it was his like worst book or worst character that he's written, and he wanted to focus on other characters, so he killed him off. And then his fans didn't like that. So I think that's interesting. And I don't know how I feel about it because I feel like you can tell this is written by a man in the 1800s because Sherlock Holmes is super full of himself. I feel like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle tried to make him humble but failed at it because he's very braggy, and I didn't like it. I don't really like the character of Sherlock. I mean, I guess that's a good thing that it's written in the perspective of Watson. Watson is telling these stories about Sherlock Holmes, but the fact that Watson is so enamored with Sherlock Holmes is kind of just like, why? He's not that great. So yeah. I mean, I might have just blasphemed to a whole bunch of classic readers, and I'm sorry about that, but yeah. I think there are two of the stories in here. I actually rated all of them in here, and two of them I gave 4 stars, and the rest were 3.5 or lower. None of these got 5 stars. I think overall I'd probably give this book 2 stars. But yeah, if you're interested in the ones that I thought were actually pretty good, even though I still felt like they were kind of predictable, I still felt like the tension and the build-up and the mystery was still pretty good. The Adventure of the Speckled Band and The Adventure of the Copper Beeches. So, really enjoyed those. Will I read more Sherlock Holmes? Probably, because I have a giant anthology, so eventually. And then another classic that I recently finished was The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, which I did not love, and it's totally the audiobook's fault. I talked about this again in my most recent wrap-up where the narrator I listened to 2 different audiobooks too. The narrator was just super whiny and they weren't good. So this book, if you don't know anything about the Phantom of the Opera, where have you been? I'm just kidding. So it's about this opera house in Paris where there is the Phantom who lives within the opera house, and he has like these demands of his, like he wants his operas to be performed, and he wants Christine Daae to be the one to perform the lady leads. And bad things happen if you don't follow his rules. And you learn more about the opera ghost being kind of, it's like a weird dichotomy of like feeling bad for him and also thinking he's a complete monster and asshole because the way that he was treated throughout his life, and like the fact that he wants to be loved and no one will love him. And so he does these drastic things that cause people not to love him. So it's kind of annoying. I love, love, love the musical. And I feel like the characterization in the musical versus the audiobooks was so much better. One thing I didn't like, and this I don't think will change if I reread this. So it's basically like like Gaston Leroux is kind of like the detective who's solving the case. That's kind of like the way that he's telling the story. And he kind of is like interviewing each of the different people who were involved. And it kind of like the people while they're being interviewed are talking about what happened. And then he would pull you out of the story to talk about like something. And I felt that was a very weird way to tell it. So I didn't love that. And again, it might be that the audiobook kind of did that, but it also might not be. It might be that that's just how it is. So we'll see when I get over my trauma of the audiobooks and decide to reread this. The last classic that I finished was Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. And this is a collection of letters to a young poet that are supposed to be like inspirational and blah blah blah. I honestly did not get really much of anything out of them, and it was kind of forgettable. I think like the first letter or the first few letters were like kind of inspiring, and the rest of them I was just like, okay, I'm done with this. So not a huge fan of those. I think I would like to read some of his actual work rather than like him trying to inspire people by telling them to write or whatever. Like I would rather read his poems, so we'll see. I don't know. And the classic that I got a quarter of the way through was Anna Karenina. I know at the beginning of the year I was like, if I make it through this book, I'll be happy. I didn't, so obviously I'm not happy. I really liked this so far. It's kind of interesting when, like, because I know the story. I've read an adaptation. I know like parts of it from like Gilmore Girls, because, you know, like Anna Karenina is like Rory Gilmore's one of Rory Gilmore's favorite books. Like she talks about Anna Karenina in her graduation speech. So like I knew pretty much the concept of it, and so far I do really like it. There were some surprises in it for me, and then some of the characters were a little like, oh, huh, interesting. Like Levin, for example, everyone and their mother loves him. But he's like super staunchly traditional, and he's very harsh in his opinions about people who don't fall into the moral guidelines that he follows. So he's very judgmental. He's very judgy, basically. And I heard that he gets better throughout the book, so I'm excited to see that. Honestly, his story is the only one that I really care about, because I know how the other one ends, and he's gonna make me feel the feels, and I don't want to feel the feels. But yeah, I'm going to finish this eventually. It might take me a while to get there. I did vlog my first quarter of the book, so I will put that in the description box. And then I'm planning on vlogging the rest of the way through the book, and I'll eventually I'll post it. Eventually I'll read it. So subscribe so you don't miss that. So yeah, I did really enjoy this, and I'm going to continue reading it eventually. I also, I think, was surprised by how easy it was to read. This specific translation is, I think, a bit different than the like usual translations. But I think because I listened to the audiobook a little bit, and of course the audiobook is like the original translation or something, the more popular one. And I find them both pretty easy to read, which I think makes sense, because I'm pretty sure like Leo Tolstoy, like he wrote for the masses. Like he didn't write for, you know, aristocracy. He wanted everyday people to be able to read his books. Yeah. Leo Tolstoy is actually a very interesting person too. I think it's funny because Levin is supposed to be like characterization of Tolstoy, and the way that he describes Levin, I was just like, somebody appreciates themselves very much. Which, I mean, like, if you're gonna write a book, why not? Why not? Those were all of the classics that I read / started this year. Is this a very impressive list? Not really. Not compared to 2020. 2020, I think I read a lot of classics, I want to say. But this year was a year of not caring about what people think of my reading, and therefore reading a ton of romance, which made me happy, and that's all that matters. I think I will post a video in the new year about what classics I'd like to read in 2022. I would like to finish out Jane Austen. That would be amazing. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Probably nothing, to be honest. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to know what your favorite classic that you read this year. If I had to pick a favorite out of these that I read, definitely would have been Emma. I think I enjoyed this book the most while reading it. I enjoyed the adaptation. This is a book also that I've been thinking a lot about, and I think that I'd like to reread eventually, so that would be my favorite classic of the year. What was your favorite classic? Please tell me in the comments below. Thank you again for watching this video, and I'll see you in a new one soon. Bye!